Welcome to the Higher Ed Demand Gen podcast, helping higher education marketing leaders share knowledge about learning, strategies, and tactics that are relevant today. See what you can learn today by listening to one of our episodes.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Higher Ed Demand Gen podcast, hosted by Concept 3D. If you like our content, please follow or subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple, Google. And if you're on Apple, please drop us a comment. I'd love to hear what you think about the show. My name is Shiro Hattori, and I will be your host today. And I'm really looking forward to talking about how to get families invested in the new FAFSA and the secret to a steady year-over-year growth in enrollment. For the conversation, I'm very excited to have Cynarah Alcantara join us today. She is the Assistant Vice President for Enrollment Marketing at the University of Puget Sound. Welcome to the show, Cynarah.
Hello, thank you, Shira, for having me.
I ask all my guests this, but what do you love about higher ed?
So I'm the first person in my family to go to college. I come from what is considered a third world country, the Dominican Republic, and to be able to go to school has afforded me a lot of opportunities in my life. I am where I am today because of that education. And so when I got the opportunity to work for the University of Puget Sound, I was really excited to be in an environment that had created so much opportunities for me because I kind of imagined that I was going to be also helping students from all walks of life to be able to take advantage of the education. And basically the answer is that I truly believe in the power of education.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thanks so much for sharing that. I know also, I'll ask you about your background, but I do know that you actually made this switch into higher ed. So that's very fascinating, interesting as well. So yeah, can you start us off with telling us a little bit more about your background and your role at Puget Sound?
Yeah, my current role at Puget Sound is Assistant Vice President of Enrollment Marketing. Our VP of Enrollment came about a year before I was hired, and part of his strategic enrollment plan was to bring in some marketing expertise into the admission and enrollment department. And so I was hired on to help build the marketing team. We had really great admissions counselors that spend some of their time doing marketing and then getting support from the larger sort of marketing communications team in the university. But with this new leadership, he just felt that given where things are going with all of the changes in the industry, that it might be wise to just have people in enrollment that this is their full-time job. So I came in and built the team. So it's myself and about 4 other folks, and then we still collaborate with the main university marketing communications team to support each other. And that's kind of like what I do. How I came to this, I started my career in like traditional advertising agencies, actually in San Francisco, serving a lot of consumer brands. Actually, Clorox was my first account, the Clorox company that has many products. And then I moved over to Washington from California and started doing again more consumer product. I eventually made the switch and started doing tech, so a lot of Microsoft, many years of Microsoft, and then I've also been an entrepreneur. I ran my own marketing agency for many years. It was a multicultural marketing agency and fully integrated, and also had my own publication for 5 years. And then from there, I moved to what we call the client side and have managed multiple marketing teams in every role that I've had. Prior to this, I've also gone in to restructure or build marketing teams from the ground up. So from strategy to operations, execution, and all of the pieces of marketing. So that gives you a good background of where I've been.
That's amazing. That's great. And I know you work with Lindsay Nyquist as well. She's been on the show, so a quick shout out to Lindsay as well.
Yeah, she joined us last May as our Associate Vice President of Marketing Communications. And so her team and my team collaborate on a regular basis. And she's great.
That's amazing. Thank you. Well, yeah, let's jump into these topics that we talked about in our introduction call. So I know you've been dealing, not just you, obviously, but all of higher ed has been dealing with all the FAFSA delays going on, right? They just extended their timeline again to supposedly mid-March. And yeah, there's just a lot of shifts in the industry. So can you first tell us kind of what's going on as just a summary? And then from there, like, how has Puget Sound actually dealt with ongoing delays and issues?
Well, in the past, we would start getting FAFSAs around October, and this past year, we were told that we were gonna, because of the changes that were coming that are supposed to simplify the process, but also um, make sure that for some of the more disadvantaged group that it was going to help to figure out ways that it would possibly make the education a little bit more affordable. So the net is that it's supposed to help families really simplify the process and hopefully maybe even figure out better ways to pay or for their education. However, this new system was supposed to be up and running by the latest in December, and then we were told that it was going to be January, and then at the end of January we were told that it's not until March. And one of the things that I think families were maybe not understanding is that what that meant for the universities is that we don't have the information, because if even if they put their information on the system, that information hasn't been coming to us, so therefore there's nothing that we can do to prepare their financial aid packages or offer. And so one of the things that I've appreciated about our leader is that he really brought in his leadership team. So our director of data, our director of admissions, and myself, and also associate vice president for student financial services, and just had a lot of communication. And I think one of the things I really appreciated from him was that I think that a lot of institutions sort of had a knee-jerk reaction to make decisions really quickly, like let's just extend the deadline or do this, and instead we just kind of sat and talked about it. And our data director, Martha Wilson, came up with the idea of, why don't we do a form? And it's very simple. It was 4 questions, and it basically said, excuse me, it's a very simple form that it was just one click for the student. It gave them 4 options, and it said, I don't plan to submit the FAFSA. I've already submitted it. I am trying to submit it, but I'm having trouble, or I plan to, right? And so I worked, once Martha had the form ready, I worked with my team and Robin, who's our director of undergraduate admissions, to really make sure that message was really clear. Like, here's what's going on, and here's why we need your information. And if you tell us where you're at in the process, and we can make sure that we can serve you according to what you say to us. And we had a lot of responses to that. I think within a minute, because I was literally in a meeting and clicking, we had like 20 like within a minute, and we ended up with about close to 1,500 responses. About 80% of them said that they had already submitted, which was great. But for the ones that were not planning to file it, we made, we're not going to email you anymore, because now we know, right? We don't need to keep bothering about this. And then for the ones that said that they plan to, we followed up about a week and a half later and says, hey, you told us that you plan to. We just want to make sure that you try to do it by the new deadline for that FAFSA, which is February 29th. And then for those that were struggling, it created an opportunity for our admissions counselors to have a touch point with them, because our admissions counselors reached out to those folks. And I think it was a really good way, again, to let parents know, here's what's going on, here's how we're trying to support you, and here's what happens next. And I think that we feel pretty good about it. And again, our leader is always, we have these conversations together, and it's great that we're not like super reacting. That's not to say that we're not going to extend our deposit deadline at some point, but right now we're just kind of seeing how things kind of move forward, right? We're all just kind of in pins and needles waiting for what's going to happen in the middle of March and see where we're going to be. But it was great to hear that about 80% of our respondents had already submitted it. So that was really encouraging.
I really like that because, instead of just emailing all your applicants and then asking them to reach out to you, I think you just sent a simple digital form, right? With the 4 questions via
Yeah,
email, was it? Yep.
it was literally on the email itself, and they could just click on
Oh,
it.
cool.
So it was very simple. The other thing is we also sent it to the parents and let them know, hey, we sent this form to your child.
Smart.
Obviously, you're not going to be able to fill out the form because it's through the student portal and Slate. But at least we let them know this is what is going on, and here's what we have asked your student to do. And then the other thing also, making sure we had prior to all this, early on in the process, we had created a FAFSA like web page that was providing. And so, of course, we updated that information on the website, trying to keep all of the areas where people might be finding information up to date. The other thing that we did when we were getting a lot of questions to our admission counselors in general about a FAFSA. And so we actually ended up collecting like an FAQ of FAFSA and sending an emails to parents and students that said, hey, these are all of the questions that have come in from a lot of folks about the FAFSA. So we actually sent an email that we called FAFSA FAQ as well. And so I think, again, trying to be really thoughtful about the types of communications that we're sending them so that they know that they're intentional and not just because we're just sending you another email. Because the thing is, we know that they're also getting email from other institutions, right? And so we want to be as thoughtful as we can be with every touch point that we have with them.
Absolutely. And then, from like an ease of use or like user experience, I think it's much easier to like, if I am struggling with it, like to click a button on the form, right? Than it is to like reply back to an admissions counselor, right? Like it seems like a much lower lift. And then you guys can know on the Puget Sound end, like, okay, these are the students, 80% of the students don't need help. You can focus in on, the smaller subset of students, which I think is incredible, right? Then you can be more efficient with your outreach. It creates a lower lift for your students and the parents as well. So it's kind of like, it's both ends are happy with the process. And I think that's super smart. And I love the FAQ portion as well, because if you get it, if you get asked a question more than once, like it's probably valuable for a lot of people. So creating a content asset from it will help, again, the parent or the student, and then it'll also help your end in terms of like having to answer questions. So both incredible.
We were also trying to lower the burden on all of the admissions counselor because I mean that's all they were doing was, and they were all getting similar questions. And so one, we send it an email and then we put it on that web page as well, right? So it's there, so that if a counselor does get a question, they can always just say, oh, great, but if you have any other questions, here's where you can go, right? So
Yeah, that's great. And on the topic of, including families and parents, I know that you actually held a financial aid like virtual event as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
yeah, so we have started, I think, since last year. I think we had done them before, but we would do it later in the cycle. And so I think last year and this year we decided to do it earlier. We had internal conversations whether we should still keep that virtual financial aid night, and we wanted to do it because we knew that even though a lot of it was going to focus on FAFSA, it gave us an opportunity to speak to folks, in today's version of face to face, right? With families of, outside of just an email communication. And so we had our associate vice president of student financial service and our director of undergraduate admission, and we had kind of a fireside chat type thing, and we held an hour of just fielding their questions. I mean, I think clearly they introduce themselves and do a little bit, but it was really just to answer the questions. And so we had close to 200 registering for that. And then, obviously there's some people that don't show up today, but We felt pretty good about it. We felt good about the conversations that were had and being able to ease a little bit of the angst that all families are feeling right now, right? This is very stressful for everybody. And so we just want to say, hey, we get it. It's stressful and we're here to support you and we're going to answer your questions. And so it was a really nice event that we have, and we have another one scheduled for March. That depending on what we get from the FAFSA, we might have to move or not. But I think again, it's just being there for families and supporting them.
Yeah, and for the listeners who don't know much about Puget Sound, it is a smaller institution, and so like I don't know the exact undergrad count, but it's roughly somewhere over 2,000, and so 200 families is a lot just in that. But the fact that I didn't know this before the call, but you told me 80% of the students filled out on the form that they had successfully filed their FAFSA, right? So that means like that's not a big percentage, that are having issues. So it's pretty incredible you got 200 families to sign up, because that's like probably more than people who answered that they were having issues with the FAFSA filing. So that's
And the
great.
number is about 5.3% that were having trouble. So
Okay,
out
got
of
it.
the
Thank you.
1,500 that
Yeah.
filled out the form.
No, that's yeah. So 200 is a lot, right? Like, they're not a school with 40,000 undergrads.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, our undergraduate admission is about 2,000, and our undergraduate admission is about 2,000, and then yeah, like I said, we had close to 200 registered, but obviously we didn't have everyone show up, so it was less
mhm.
than that. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And then just final thoughts, just like, dealing with all the communication around FAFSA and all the delays, right? I think one thing you recommended just is keeping the communication just simple and supportive, and that usually translates to being effective. Can you tell us a little bit more about that as well?
well, just very clear. I don't have any proof for this, but I just have this distinct feeling that everybody's just hearing FAFSA delays and FAFSA this and FAFSA that, but I don't know if families actually knew that what that meant was that we were not getting their information. So the first part of the email was just explaining like, hey, this news came out and this is what it means. It means that until we get this information, which now we're being told is not until March, we're not going to be able to deliver your full package because we've already released uh, our merit aid awards, but the need base we cannot, we're not able to determine that because we need this information. So I think I wanted to make sure that we were very clear from the beginning. This is what's happening, and in order to serve you better, you can help us by letting us know where you are in the process, so that then we can figure out how to serve you. And in some cases, that meant that we just left people alone, right? We're not asking them to do this one thing over and over again. And so that's basically where we focused it. And then with the follow-up communications with the rest, whether it was from the admissions counselors themselves, or was it a follow-up with the FAQ, or with like, hey, you told us you plan to, we just want to remind you that you should be doing it.
That's phenomenal. Yeah, I'm learning a lot. I've brought up some of the things you've told me in our intro call with several other guests, and they're like, "Oh, that's a great idea." So, I love all the good work you've been doing. And I hope, that section that we just talked about provides some value for other enrollment folks. So that's great. Well, switching gears slightly a little bit, still on the topic of enrollment, obviously, is, in your 2.5 years or so with Puget Sound, I know you and your team have been able to see an increase in enrollment. I think 14% specifically, a little over that, but year over year. And yeah, I'm just curious of all the different new marketing initiatives you and your team have put together that have helped reach that increase in enrollment year over year.
Great, thank you. I want to just again give credit to Martha Wilson and our team who did the form, not me, but we worked together on everything else. But yeah, that number is from last year. Obviously, we don't know where our numbers are going to land this year, and everything is kind of up in the air with, especially with the FAFSA. But yes, last year we had 14.3% increase in enrollment. I came the year in the cycle prior, and we did go up a little bit that year, but I came like November 1st, which is our first deadline for our early decision and early applications. But, since day one, I just kind of just started to look at everything, right? You come in new and it's like, okay, let's look at our emails and let's look at our audiences. And I think one of the things that, again, because we had really amazing admission counselors that were doing marketing on the side, there was limited capacity, right, to what they could do in terms of thinking long term, and a lot of it was just getting, doing the thing that's in front. So a lot of the focus was almost kind of on that like rising senior versus a lot further. So one of the things that I really wanted to do was really think about our audience when I think about marketing. That's usually where I start. And so I kind of have to say, okay, we have multiple audiences here, right? Like they're not the same. They don't really think of it the same way. And even for the students themselves, I said, the way they're thinking about it, their sophomore and the junior year might be completely different than how they're thinking about it in their senior. And not only that, like how you think about it while you're applying versus when you get accepted versus when you're considering. And so I really try to think of the cycle itself and also the audiences. And so what is the most relevant message that I can give each of these audiences at that sort of point in time, right? And so in thinking about application push, just information in general about our organization. And when I looked at emails, a lot of our emails were very similar from our prospect to, and I basically said, these prospect things, they're very just pushing Puget Sound. And I said, when you're kind of starting to look, I want to provide them information that's helping them determine the kind of school that they want to. So more of a resource, and then we can plug in. And by the way, here's Puget Sound. So like, for example, one of our first emails was big school or small school, right? And so like, we kind of talked about like, you need to determine what kind of an institution is going to be best for you, a small liberal arts or a big institution. And we kind of talked about like, here are the benefits of going to a big one, here's the benefits, and then to a small one. And then, by the way, we're a small one if you want to consider us. And then things like, I think our second one, which had a huge open rate at the time, was we called it major drama. Like, how do you think about figuring out your major? And then we really plugged in at the end that, you don't have to decide that right away at Puget Sound, and that you can really explore a lot of options before you even need to decide. And so what we saw in emails, for example, was that average open rate of emails prior to when we started to really think about the students and the cycle. So, thinking about moving them from prospect to inquiry went from like average of 18% to like 45%, and sometimes something over 50. And even now that we've kind of done that over 2 years and we continue to tweak it, and we actually every year just sit down and be like, okay, let's look at what were the most effective emails and why, and then we tweak. And then so here's like, interestingly enough, the first year that we did all that, we actually were able to move because then obviously, let me backtrack. So that was like moving people from suspects or prospects to inquiries. And then for inquiries, we started to really dig in more into why Puget Sound, right? Like now we start to talk to you more about that. And then the other thing that we did, for example, and now this is really fully fleshed out, was also do communications for applicants as well. We didn't really do a lot of communications for applicants, so we could have a student that applied in August and they weren't hearing from us until December. And so we actually started another drip campaign for applicants where we give them slightly different information. So we're thinking about every aspect of the process. And then for Yale, really starting to think about what are the things that are going to help me make this decision. And now I have to envision myself here. So we really started talking about very specific things on campus, very specific things in the city for them to envision themselves here. And so one of the things that I was excited about the last 2 years is that we were able to convert inquiries to applicant, it was about 14% the first year. And then last year, which is when we had our biggest enrollment yield, we actually went almost to 22% from inquiry to application. And so we have really, with our team, really thought about all the process. So for yield, again, picture yourself here. That was kind of like how we thought about it. The other big thing, right, there's a student, but we know that the students have a circle of influence. So we started to do more concerted communications to their guidance counselors. So like in early September, we sent more of a newsletter to counselors that says, here's everything that you need to know to support your students, from deadlines to events to process to requirements, all of that. We started to do similar things with the
High school counselors? Is that to the
yeah.
high school counselors?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
And then the other big one that we know, because everybody's saying parents are cool again, is that it's parents, right? So now we started to also really think about communicating with parents and thinking about, well, what do I think about? And of course, I actually have a sophomore in high school, and a lot of this comes from me thinking like, what would I care about? But also I also go to a lot of webinars and look at the data. But parents care about outcomes, parents care about safety, parents care about costs of education, parents care about resources. So we try to give information to parents about the things that we think they're going to care about, and we try to give to students what students care about. It's interesting because up until recently, we thought that students weren't as concerned about outcomes and their future. And now my data and every little thing that I have, multiple things, is telling me that the new incoming class and the ones after that, they're really concerned about outcomes. They're really concerned about their future and what kind of jobs. So now we're starting to shift our message to include some of that, in addition to like, picture yourself here and where am I going to, we have this really cool thing called what are the other 153, and this is not a concept that I came with. This is something that
what was that? Sorry, I missed that. What was
the
it?
other 153 hours in your week. And so this is a concept that I think our director of events, that he had like a sheet that talked about that, right? And we're like, why don't we turn that into email, right? Like, you only go to class for X amount of time, but there's all this time. Like, what do you do with these 153 hours? And so then we really started to tell them about, like, here's the coffee shops you can go. Here's all of the clubs and whatever in sports. So we also took that concept into emails as well, to kind of show students that there's so much more to college, right? Like, some of them are so concerned about their major and what it's going to be, but we also know they're concerned about fitting in, right? And so we want to make sure they get that as well. And one of the things that we even have as part of that initial campaign for prospects is that we actually start to tell people early on, like, what kind of student comes to Puget Sound, because we want students that have a higher affinity for us as we keep moving them down the funnel. And so, if that's why the big school, small school was one of our first ones, because it's like, here's a perfect example. I have two step kids, and they are definitely big school material. They just sports and cheerleader, football. They love that. My daughter is more of an artist. She's totally Puget Sound material. And so we already know that, right? And so you kind of have to start somewhere, and then, okay, well, now that I know, well, what kind of programs do they have? What kind of culture do they have in there? What is the student to faculty interaction? What are the opportunities for me? And so really thinking about all of the things that I think I really emphasize for my team, for us to really think about, put ourselves in the shoes. And I have one of the person in my team, she graduated from Puget Sound not too long ago, and I was like, what was it like for you? And then when we have our student workers, I asked them all the time, I'm like, what were you doing? Like, why do you come here? Were you looking at our social media? I'm constantly asking questions of everybody, because I'm also, I'm not the target. I'm gonna be the target as a mom, but just as a student, as a young person. So it's really a lot goes back to that, really trying to understand your audience and what they care about, where they're at. And so we were very pleased with that increase in enrollment last year. I don't know where we're going to be this year, honestly, with everything that's going on. And then, all of the increase in the open rates for our emails. And even, with our social, we have now a strong social team, and we were able to launch our TikTok at the end of October, and we've had well over 100,000 views on our videos. Really focus on our Instagram as well, and that's gone up. So just like I spent a lot of time looking at the data from just the marketing side of things, and then I appreciate that our VP Dr. Matt Voice, he's really focused on data on that enrollment side, and then we have Martha, and so I just appreciate that we're really focused on data, and then we try to really use that data to pivot and do that as quickly as possible. And it's great to be within the department because we can do it really quickly. Sometimes we're literally crafting an email that morning because of something we saw and sending it out. We have a very detailed plan for everything, but when we need to quickly pivot to this type of communication because of what's going on, we're able to do it.
Yeah, this is all amazing. I think if we could take the last 15 minutes of what you just said, we could create like a how-to guide on finding your audience, how to break apart your audience into segments within the enrollment funnel, because you broke that down very nicely, and what kind of content, or in terms of like just email content or content with call to actions, where to send them where to send them to, based on where they fit in that funnel. Which is really great, and I think it all ties to the reasons why students are attending school, which you talked about outcomes a little bit as well. So I think this is all fantastic. We actually just launched a poll where we I think polled 500 students about what's most important to them for commitment day, which was really interesting. And so most students answered that making the right choice was their biggest fear of commitment day. And so like I think all those things you just outlined in the email, from just trying to educate them on where are they looking for, smaller class sizes, or bigger school with a football team, right? And moving from there to really help explain what Puget Sound is and what the school stands for and what the campus is like, helps kind of address that fear of making the right choice. So I think that was all really great.
Yeah, and I think the thing that we're also trying to do more of is basically trying to have our students tell that story. So we do a lot of day in the life via email or via social, because we know that students want to hear from students, and even parents want to hear about the student experience. Because when we have our events here, the parents love to go to the student panels and ask the same questions that they ask our administrators. And I always think it's great, right? Because they're like, are they going to match, right? So that's one thing. I think the other thing that I didn't mention that we also have done was really a big focus on anti-melt, for example. So my first year, in my first cycle, I did a very comprehensive, what we call enrollment FAQs. And the idea behind that was like, hey, our admission counselors are not available all the time, but a lot of the conversations are happening after hours with families, right? It's happening at the dinner table, it's happening right before you're going to bed. And I was like, what about, like, because I do this, if you have a question at 2 a.m. or at 7 o'clock at night and nobody, and so we try to think of every single aspect, like, can I bring a hot pot to my dorm room? Where am I going to park? Like, what about if I'm sick? And so we try to think about all that. And then we also develop what we call the new student website, which is a hub that has all of the information that incoming students are going to need, from, the orientation dates to all of the due dates to all of the things that are happening. And with the enrollment FAQs, even though it's kind of an anti-melt piece, we also use it as a yield tool to have students, as they're starting to have those questions, have those answers as well. And so that's another thing that we focus, again, thinking about the entire cycle from application to yield to anti-melt, and thinking about all of the touch points of communications. And so that was another thing that I think has done really well for us. And we've also seen low melt in the last 2 cycles. And I think part of it is that, but part of it is that also our admissions director and his team have really focused on providing a lot of support for those families during that space, and also our student financial services as well, being able to answer their questions and make themselves available. We have had like um, office hours kind of setups for families to connect with student financial services that are considering, so that those questions can be answered for them as well. So, I mean, I don't take all the credit. It's been like a huge uh, team effort across the board, and I'm just very one of the things that I think has helped me is that um, Dr. Boyce, my RVP, he's been really good at just like letting us try things and also providing the support we need to experiment, right? Like one of the things that I didn't mention too, in addition to all the stuff we talked about, was also meeting those students that where they're at from a language standpoint. So when we came, a lot of the emails were very institutional, which is great. We're a prestigious university, we should, but you're 17, right? So we kind of like just toned it down from that institutional voice for the student. We still keep a level of professionalism and prestige for how we talk to parents and how we talked to our graduates, for example. But that was another thing, and I think that you also need to have a leadership that's going to allow you to do and try these things. And for me, not coming from higher ed, I had a lot of support from a director of graduate admissions, and just working with them all the time and doing gut checks. I'm like, I want to kind of go this way, but I also know that higher ed is different. I want to make sure that I'm not going to like really mess it up here. I want to make sure that this is not going to be so different that we're going to be off-putting to someone, right? And so it's been a lot of that. And so I think having a strong team from all aspects of the enrollment office is really important to be successful as well. And I have that with Martha in data and with Robin in admission, and obviously with our leader and with SFS. I think I mentioned that last year we spent a lot of time doing financial literacy. This year was hard to do because of the FAFSA, but we worked really closely with the student financial services staff to get information from them, to do little videos. And it was great because we saw increase to our net price calculator pages. We saw increase in FAFSA submissions the prior year from a lot of that. So again, it's a group effort. I'll leave it at that.
That's great. And yeah, shout out to good leadership that lets their teams some agency to do their work, because I think that's very key to the world we live in today, and especially in higher ed, where we need to move faster, I think, than previously before. Also, love the term anti-melt. I might start using that, because we usually say like reduce melt, because we publish content on reduction of melt as well. And so I might take that from you if that's okay. I like anti-melt.
It's not mine. It's what my boss told me, right? He
Okay,
explained it.
cool.
He explained the
That's
cycle
good.
to me, and then I was like, okay, now I have to develop a plan that addresses the cycle. And I didn't even know, and now like it's very specific to like enrollment folks, I think. I didn't know what it was. I was like, what do you mean, anti-melt? But that's kind of what, when I think about, because one of the things I had to do to really wrap around my head around higher education was to really understand these things. So I was like, okay, well, let me think about this. This is application push, this is yield, this is anti-melt, and here's the activities that we do, and here's the audiences. And so I kind of did this visual that, that's when my manager was like, oh, you get it. And I was like, yeah, well, you explained it pretty well. So there we go. And so it's not my term. I don't know where it came from, but I learned it here through my manager. So don't give me credit for his own thing.
Well, we're just at about time right now, and I'm wondering where our listeners can, connect with you to understand all the good work you're doing.
I'm on LinkedIn, Cynarah. I know that's really hard to spell, but you'll have it spelled somewhere. And then also, you guys can email me at my Puget Sound email, which is my first initial and my last name at pugetsound.edu. And yeah, I would love to connect with other folks. I'm fairly new, 2.5 years. I feel like everybody I meet has been doing it for so long, and there's so much more that I can learn. So, yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining, and thanks for our listeners for tuning in today.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.